Hey everybody, this is Lydia,
Hi, this is Avery.
and welcome to PLIX Space Food Online. PLIX, for those of you who are joining us for the first time, or maybe needed a refresher, we collaborate between us, Media Lab researchers, and public librarians to create wonderful STEAM activities, creative STEAM activities for the public library setting. So just before we kick off, I have a couple announcements. One is that we have our Facilitating Creative Learning workshop coming up this November 17th and 18th online in collaboration with the Cambridge Public Library. We're really excited to work with them on this. It's part of a project that we're doing from a grant, the IMLS Laura Bush 21st Century Library Program Award. I think I said that wrong, and I will correct myself in the chat, but that's what I think it's called. So we're very excited about that. You should definitely apply now. The application is like 5 minutes long. It looks long, but you can do it quickly, and it's due November 1st. And yeah, it'll be 2 great half days of online, collaborative, and hands-on experiences. So that's one thing. And then some more upcoming PLIX workshops. We have a community call happening December 17th from 12 to 1. And you may have joined us in the end of September for our community call. It was great. And I'm looking forward to this one too, because we'll be talking about some of the results from our co-design, which you can learn more about on our forum. And we also have our urban ecology email mini course, which you can sign up online for. It's 3 weeks of emails from Avery, and we have some people interacting in our forum about it, and that's going well. And then also on our YouTube channel, this will be posted, but also our archive of all of our past online workshops. So definitely make sure to check that out. Okay, I'm almost done. Our agenda, we're doing a little welcome right now. Avery's going to do a short presentation about sensory experiences in space. Then he'll give an overview of our activity and tell us about some of our new materials. And then we will break out and discuss how might you run this activity in your library right now for your patrons. Then we'll get back together, share, wrap up, and get on with our day. So yeah, take it away, Avery.
Great, thanks, Lydia. So I'm excited to share with all of you the PLIX Space Food activity. And this is a creative learning activity that's centered on creating new tools, new inventions, new experiences and flavors and processes to enhance the future of dining, the future of life in outer space. So I'm sure you can all conjure up an image of modern space food in your heads. It's exactly what you're thinking of, that sort of desiccated, dehydrated food shoved in a bag. And that's really sort of the state of the art right now. This is where we're at after several decades of space food research. As you can imagine, if you're an astronaut aboard the ISS, this isn't the most pleasant experience. You do get to collaborate with NASA a bit and decide on some favorite snacks or foods to bring, and research scientists will come up with methods to actually prepare that food for space. But in general, you're limited to this sort of packaging. And the reason for that is the harsh outer space environment and also the context. So astronauts reside on the International Space Station, or ISS. And ultimately, they're there to do science, carry out scientific missions. And so often the sensory experiences or the comforting food experiences are put in second place compared to the scientific research. So when you think about space, you also think about the harsh environments, the harsh physical constraints related to space. And all of these contribute to the way that food packaging is currently created and maintained. So those images that we saw before are in part due to a lot of these different circumstances. So just to highlight some examples, you experience microgravity in outer space, which affects fluid behavior. So you can't pour easily, you can't drink easily. This fluid alteration or behavioral change of fluids also affects physiology. It is hypothesized that this affects your sinuses, the fluid inside of your sinuses, ultimately dulling your sense of taste. So not only do you have to deal with this sort of unappetizing food, but it also doesn't taste as good. It doesn't taste as flavorful. Again, getting back to that idea of carrying out scientific missions, there's a lot of pricey equipment on the ISS and lots of it. And so those get priority for spacing over, say, things like a refrigerator or an oven. And so that flat packed food, that dehydrated food, is actually designed in a way to last very long, to be packaged in a way that is space efficient, and is designed in a way that is not producing crumbs, for example, to not get any crumbs in the air filtration systems. Another quick highlight is this idea that you cannot have any fermented foods on the ISS, like fermentation, or sorry, processes that require fermentation because bacteria and microbes are ultimately not permitted. And this is because there's lots of ionizing radiation in space. This causes mutations in bacteria, and ultimately we can't predict what these mutations will do. And so it in fact becomes hazardous to have these processes on board the ISS. And so the space food of tomorrow, it's actually an area of research at the Media Lab, an active area of research through a group called the Space Exploration Initiative. And we partnered with the researcher who's pictured here on the left, Maggie Koblenz, to design this learning activity. Maggie's research focuses on creating new food and new sensory experiences to improve life in outer space. And Maggie likes to say that, you can picture yourself as an astronaut. For the first couple of days, if you picture a shorter duration space flight, you can kind of rough it out, thinking that you're going camping. It's a very extreme version of camping, but you can get used to, at least for a couple of days, this food in a bag or not having the equipment that you sort of long for. But increasingly, as we think about space tourism and long duration space flight to Mars or even beyond, then becomes more of a problem if you're spending years in outer space. You sort of like get disconnected from a lot of the traditions or cultural elements that keep you sane on Earth or give you identity on Earth. And so this is just what Maggie hopes to address and investigate through her research. So 2 quick examples. On the left is a molecular gastronomy experiment. Maggie is injecting, I think it's lemon flavor, into a sphere of ginger. And this is to address that, thinking about those constraints in gravity, we can actually recontextualize them as opportunities. And Maggie likes to say that she's creating sculptures or playing with her food in 3 dimensions in outer space, which is a fun way to think about it. A little bit of a different lens on the right is algae caviar, and Maggie designed this actually to look like Earth. So the flavor is earthy, but it also conjures an image of the Earth. And so it's supposed to connect astronauts with their home planet as they're in outer space in this sort of cold, aseptic environment. And so questions that Maggie and other folks investigating the future of space food are looking at include things like, how can we introduce new flavors in long duration space flight? And another quick example there is an example of space miso. And so space miso is, of course, generated by microbial activity. So this is an experiment, an early experiment, looking at if you contain this miso, is it safe to have on the ISS? And also, how do the microbes in this miso behave? At the same time, we're looking at different tools and technologies to augment sensory and space food experiences. So you can think about something like VR to investigate how can we create new sensory experiences to connect astronauts with Earth. And so again, these are what space food researchers are investigating, but it's also the type of question that you can explore with your patrons as you're thinking about building out prototypes for space food. So I wanna direct everyone to the activity repository for the space food activity overview. We'll put a link in the chat. But this is a resource that will basically have the flow of the workshop, some prompts to get started, and also all of the additional resources we'll discuss. One of these, of course, is our brand new space food zine. So shout out to Kara, who is our visual designer at PLIX, who created this amazing new zine. We encourage you to always use these zines as a resource, as a starting out point for getting your patrons excited about the topic. And you'll find that there's a lot of gadgets and gizmos and technologies in there that will sort of lead to more independent research on behalf of your patrons. So do check out that resource. I think it's really awesome. And so thinking about the space food activity itself, I'm gonna close that notification, I apologize. We think that it has a couple of different advantages or things that make it a really cool and fun, exciting learning opportunity. And the first relates to learning about different cultures in your community. So what's great about space food is that it's all about translating maybe your favorite recipe or your favorite food or tradition associated with dining and sensory experiences. And so you can imagine that there will be sort of a fingerprint approach to everyone creating unique tools and experiences to bring up into outer space. At the same time, it's a great activity to get people who are not interested in necessarily like the technical nitty-gritty of outer space, sort of the engineering side, but excited about space in general and sort of that social element that is so critical to the future of space technology, engineering, and exploration. Lastly, it's a great way to try out thinking, design thinking and communicating principles. So you can tackle that creative learning spiral, prototyping, discussing your design with other people, getting feedback, all under this cool and intuitive sort of lens of food and translating food experiences. So we do have a couple of facilitation tips for running this, either with your patrons in the library or running it at a distance. And the first relates to exploring this activity through multiple prompts. So one great thing is that you can run this activity multiple times, all under that sort of umbrella of space food, but with different sort of nuances every time. So you can think about designing utensils, so tools or appliances that would make it easier or possible to cook or dine in outer space. But you can also think about sensory experiences. So like Maggie had created algae caviar that has new flavors and new experiences for getting at your different sensory, your different senses basically in outer space. If you're working with maybe older learners or doing a family creative learning activity, you can think about incorporating something like sustainability design. So of course on the ISS, it's not a closed system. You're producing lots of waste. You'd like to minimize that waste, but you can brainstorm different protocols or processes or materials that would allow you to minimize waste and create really sustainable food practices on the International Space Station. And then my favorite is actually routine design. So thinking about a tradition that you do with your family, maybe it's a Thanksgiving meal, maybe it's making bread or cookies, having a holiday dinner, and thinking about how to recreate that experience, not only through the food, but through the social interaction, through the physical space, through the table or the cookie sheet that you're using. How can you recapitulate that in the space station? And how can you build out prototypes or examples to visualize that process? So again, all of these things are different prompts that you can explore with the same set of materials. I want to highlight a couple of great examples that we had contributed from the community that show the different range of outputs that you can do with this singular activity. The first comes from Claudia from Homer Public Library. And, Claudia created this amazing crumbless sushi cutter. So it not only cuts perfectly sized sushi rolls, but it does so in a clean and efficient manner. And does not produce any crumbs again, which could get into the equipment. So you're getting at a way to get around those constraints at the same time creating a new tool. Tracy from Hennepin County Library also created a very clever device. And this is bringing her favorite ritual of hot buttered toast in the morning into outer space. And Tracy noted that you could pop the toast out and it could go flying around the ISS. And so to get around this, they've built a cage that essentially goes around the toaster to collect the bread so as not to fly away and get around the ISS. So I thought that was pretty awesome. You can also think about ways to augment the existing technology, which is what Eva from Wellesley Free Library has done. And Eva's generated these flavor sticks that you can stick into the existing food packets. They dissolve, they give flavor to these otherwise lifeless food packets that you're working with. And so that's a really great example of just taking what already exists, the sort of next step, and adding a new flavor to that experience. Althea from Muhlenberg also had a wonderful idea, which is creating scratch and sniff stickers in space, which I think no one's done before, but it seems like they definitely should be doing that. And what I love about this is that because you can't get the sensory experience of the smell of the food packet that you're eating, you can simply attach one of these scratch and sniff stickers that's associated with the food inside and put it on, and that will ultimately, hopefully, create a more holistic and more unearthly-like food experience. Finally, Audrey had an example, Audrey from Medway Public Library, about a closed-loop food system, and specifically achieving this by thinking about the packaging of the food, using an algae-based plastic material or hydrogen material. And so these materials would be biodegradable, and so you could create at the same time a biodegrading agent, but also a green smoothie in space. So very good combination there of different tools. So another facilitation tip for this activity is starting with what you have. So another great advantage of this workshop is that it works with virtually any materials that you have on hand. So here's an example that I created exclusively, except for the battery, exclusively from the recycling bin at my parents' home when I was in quarantine. And so you can think about using that as a prompt if you want to save on materials. Use exclusive recycled materials or use only household materials. And so included there is just a list of some other additional materials that we've found in our playtest to be useful. Things like cardboard, aluminum foil, popsicle sticks, duct tape, glue. So these are just like basic materials that you can use. And of course, you can purchase these if necessary, but again, this activity works simply with what you have on hand, which is pretty great if you're thinking about running this at a distance. And of course, you can always check the activity guide on the activity repository for more material ideas. One of the most important facilitation tips for this activity relates to creating examples, creating thoughtful examples specifically. And to illustrate this point, I'm going to read a quote from Luigi from the Exploratorium. Luigi wrote that the best examples have fairly obvious shortcomings that generate ideas for improvement. An ideal reaction from a visitor is to think, oh, cool, but look, you could also just do this, which indeed means that the perfect example is actually imperfect. And apologies to Catherine, because I'm going to show her example here as it's a wonderful example. It's a perfect example because it is in fact imperfect. And so the system that Catherine has developed is a retractable utensil system that uses a built-in blue light for sterilization. And I think it's really clever, but at the same time, the fork and spoon are very earthly designs. They're sort of very familiar. And so while the prompt of this workshop is to in fact bring things from Earth into space, at the same time, we're thinking about creating new tools or inventions. So we hope that you could hand something like this to a patron and they could say, well, a fork and spoon, like why not combine them, or why not remix them or invert them? And you can sort of lend them in that creative direction through the examples for where is a good place to start next, or how can we bring this into a more futuristic or forward-thinking version of what already exists on Earth? And so as a facilitator of these workshops, if you're running this in your library, I'd encourage you to create a couple of examples just to show off not only the range of outputs for the workshops, but also keeping this idea of the imperfect example, the imperfect perfect example in mind as you prepare for working with your patrons. Related to that idea of bringing different cultures or beliefs or practices into this activity, another facilitation tip relates to encouraging family participation. Sort of like recipes are handed off, from family members, like the younger generation. Different age groups will have different practices associated that they'll want to bring into space. So it's a great activity for family learning together or family brainstorming to think about which family traditions you'd like to most bring into space, or which traditions that maybe your guardian or parent is giving you that you'd want to carry forward as you're thinking about perhaps our future life on the International Space Station. And these images, by the way, are from the 2019 PLIX at Akron workshop, where we had the chance to run the space food activity with a group of awesome librarians. So in the breakout rooms in a little bit, you'll all be discussing, thinking about how to run space food virtually or at a distance, or even in your library if some of you are back to standard operation. But we wanted to share out some original ideas or some starting points for your discussion. So ways that we maybe envision running space food virtually include posting a shared design prompt on your social media and encouraging people from your community, encouraging your patrons to share their inventions or creations with a hashtag, maybe something on Instagram or Twitter. You can also have a synchronous session where you're hosting an online make-along workshop to help patrons create their own ideas and leading them through that discussion related to outer space food and recipe development. Once you have a nice collection of recipes, you might also think about compiling your own interplanetary cookbook or a snapshot or a gallery of all the different space food examples that you've created. And lastly, you can ask your patrons to record their own cooking show for astronauts or infomercial for the products that they've created, to think about how they would sell this to NASA or ESA or even astronauts, and sharing these out on social media. So we're going to go ahead and enter the breakout rooms. I think we'll have breakouts of about 5 or 6 people. And so you'll be working with other librarians to discuss translating or bringing this programming to your library, whether that's in person or at a distance. So we will talk to you soon, and I will pop in, and Lydia will pop in as well. We look forward to discussing with you.